Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome to the very first Don't Worry About the Government Daily Dispatch. I guess I'm going to call it the Daily Dispatch. I probably won't keep the question mark at the end of it. Joining me here is my friend, your friend, Brian Halverson. How you doing, Brian?
I'll be better when I understand this is not an episode. This is not.
Not real. I mean, it is an episode of the daily version of this, which
So
is
it's
being
episode
done.
one.
Episode one, which is being done, to build out the YouTube channel, which admittedly is spotty and weird for a YouTube channel, is trying to go against the grain with the algorithm, and it turns out the algorithm doesn't really care for that. So I should instead try to go with the flow a little bit and put things on the YouTube channel that might actually pick up some steam, because right now a guitar repair video is doing better than maybe this entire channel. So I gotta step it up here a little bit.
Well, as of right now, just as far as how things are going, I don't know if you have any family on the coast.
I
But
do. I was actually visiting them on the coast here this weekend.
okay, so are they good as far as the storm coming in, or?
They're on the East Coast. There
Oh,
wasn't.
that's a whole different coast. I meant the
Oh,
Gulf Coast. I
oh, the Gulf Coast.
is that?
There are three coasts. You when you
Yes,
ask,
but
yeah,
we live in Texas, man.
But my family lives on the East Coast. So when you say the
but you
coast, I don't even think about the West Coast. I got an uncle over there. So this whole setup is blown. But do you have family on the coast?
yeah. So I someone Daniel asked about people everyone doing all right. I have some family in Houston, and uh, one of them just found a parking spot for their car on the third floor of the Houston airport garage. So I didn't even know that that was a thing. But apparently, when the storms come in, people try and get their car to the high rise garages so that they don't get trashed as the storms come in. But man, I swear, a lot of
That
people.
boy, is that a sign of desperation,
Yeah,
though? Yeah.
but a lot of people just got their house fixed from the last storm, and this is, man, it seems like this came out of nowhere. And I know this isn't a talk about climate change,
No,
but
so like
Jesus.
in a different segment, I want to break down. This will definitely be. This is why we're doing the daily dispatch format. Is I wanted to have things where we could talk about one topic sort of laser focused, and one that I want to do in greater detail is why the Republican reign over Texas is much more fragile than I think the national audience realizes, and the fragility of Houston and its absolute need for spending in terms of infrastructure is a really fantastic example of how, like, the Republicans in this state have been slowly losing these cities and the surrounding suburbs of these cities, and there's this radiating effect of people in these metroplexes, which make up way more than half of the state's population, of something like, yeah, we like business, yeah, maybe we like our industry or whatever, but like, no, things need to change, and these Republicans don't know how to govern in the state. So that's certainly something I want to revisit at another time. However, on today's episode, what we wanted to take a look at here is something that came out over the weekend while I was traveling and visiting my family on the coast, which is this story involving Joe Biden and announcing a new 6-point plan to respond to the growing COVID-19 crisis, specifically the Delta variant and now the Mu variant. A number of different alarming variants are on the horizon, and the Biden administration finally realized that they need to be doing more than they were doing. This announcement of this plan is an implicit admission that the July 4th mission accomplished little moment that we had going into July 4th weekend was extraordinarily wrongheaded, and that there was a major change necessary. So, the plan is as follows. First, it is going to require vaccinations for all federal workers and for millions of contractors that do business with the federal government. Implementation of the requirements for all of those contractors is definitely going to be a sticky wicket, but right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be much of a court challenge on that. Any thoughts about that one? Because I feel like this one's been getting underreported, but it's actually perhaps the biggest one. And we talk about what's going to happen with employers next, but millions of contractors that do business with the federal government. Now, all of them are going to be required to be vaccinated. And the question is, how is the government going to check to see that all of its contractors are vaccinated?
I like thinking about this from a federal level, but then I'm also thinking about this from a certain governors oppose this on a state level, and how they're going to want to oppose this is not going to be opposing a federal employee. They're going to want to impose this on behalf of a state employee. And I think the battlefront on this is too specific state by state to lose that frame on that as far as the Republicans are concerned. I think it's valid as far as just looking at this in the aggregate, but I don't think this is going to be fought in that way, however valid that is.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the governors right now want to fight this entirely around the employer thing, in part because the governors want to start coming off as more business friendly, which is the thing that they're having real issues with.
But who's the employer with the federal employee?
Right.
And who are you defending?
Yes, and to that point, I mean, then on the implementation side, I think the question is going to be like, how is the government agency in question going to ensure that the contractor is vaccinated? And it's not necessarily that tricky. They just need to get the card. But it's still, it's still an implementation hurdle. I want to be really clear as we're talking about all this. I was thrilled when I got off the plane and I heard that Biden was finally doing something on COVID-19. So like this is all wonderful. Next, and I just kind of keep it positive here. I'm just as far as my take here. This is just as how I expect the Republicans to oppose this. Yeah.
This is not what I hope happens.
No, I just wanted to be clear on that on the top line. I should have probably gotten that in sooner here. Next, we have the requirement for employers to provide paid time off to get vaccinated. So this is easy. There might be employers who fight this. There might be employers who are worried about this as a precedent, but the actual time that it takes to get vaccinated, especially in this scenario, is a grand total of maybe 2 hours of paid time off for each employee. It is not hard for employers to meet this. Like, I had to do this for a different job, essentially at my employer's strong request and willingness to buy lunch and pay us for the time we were out. So I was like, dude, free lunch. I did this for the flu shot. So I don't think this is some like crazy overreach. I don't expect this to be challenged. And I thought this was another sound piece of policy.
If you think about this in comparison to, for instance, a state lottery, which has been done, if you were to even give more PTO for this, even though you don't need it, if the outcome is more people get the shots because they're like, oh, all I have to do is get this shot and I get 4 hours PTO. Like, I would even be curious if that many more people get the shot because you give an irrationally, like, if you give someone the whole day off to get this shot, like, no, that is irrational. But if 3 times as many people go get the shot, do you care?
The only problem there, essentially, is that you're asking the employer to pay for it. But, like, if the government, I guess, was willing to pay for a half day, I feel like a half day is probably more reasonable given the varying pay scales or whatever. I think that's very generous, and that's exceedingly reasonable to me. You don't have to work. You're going to get paid. Go have lunch after. And prior to this, on a previous episode of the actual like full length "Don't Worry About the Government" podcast, I think it was the episode entitled "Sticks and Carrots." I talk about a whole plan of just paying people. Like I was against the lottery system, one because I don't like that it's like, oh, you get a chance to get money. Like I think that's stupid. Like, or I
Right.
think people can see through that. I like the idea of giving people money, bam, right there. And this is even better. It's like, do you not feel like lifting boxes all day?
Right.
Go and get the shot. And
Right.
right now, especially when we're looking at the groups of people who still haven't gotten the shot yet, there are a bunch of people who will get under this plan at least a couple of hours free of manual labor to go and get the vaccine, which will be good for their health. So it's sort of like it's a win-win. I like this. I my only thing to your point is I would rather see this stretched out to like it's a half day off to go and get the vaccine.
Oh yeah,
Let's
yeah.
give people a full half day.
I'm thinking about this just as far as a mere experiment. Like, what would happen if I was legislating this? This is a half day.
Oh yeah, because
But
if I could tell an employee you're off at noon today if you go and get the vaccine, I think you now all of a sudden like man, you see
Exactly.
you see
Say that-
willpower bend and break real
No,
quick when someone else says like, all right, later guys, I'm already in the vaccine.
And here's what you do: you either say that on a Friday morning, or you say that on a Sunday night on behalf of Monday morning. And you're like, that's when they'll do it.
You know this. You do that for 1 month. By like that fourth Friday, everyone's like, "Nah, dude. Like, am I really gonna be the idiot who's like, I have my principles. I will work all day Friday afternoon."
Like, yeah, I hate that people even have to be baited like this. But when you think about them in the Delta variant and kids not having the option, and like at some point, I do not care if
That's the
it,
thing. Is like it stinks that we actually can't reach out to these people who claim to be moral people in a lot of cases. Who like to be moral scolds in many cases. The fact that we can't reach out to them, like on ideas, not of politics, but like I have a business, pal, and I am a hardworking owner of my own business. The Main Street, if you remember a decade ago, the type of people who say they're on we got to support Main Street. Well, Main Street doesn't get paid time off, pal, so I need to keep working so I can't get sick. That doesn't reach them. Okay. If I tell them I work with children, and many of those children don't even have the choice of getting the vaccine if they or their parents or both wanted them to. And they're worried, and they want to stay alive and grow up to be happy adults and all these sorts of things and make it through this situation. That doesn't reach them. Okay, fine. Then look, I'm not thrilled that any of these arguments have not landed with people, but I'm also not in denial of it. And I'm really glad that the administration, in a way, isn't in denial about this. The only thing of criticism I have with this plan is it's a little scoldy, and I would like it not in don't do this. I'm glad that they're doing all these policy positions. I just think you need to frame it more as a carrots thing, and it has more of a sticks tone. That's my only knock on this plan.
yeah, and I wish before we had this chat that I had looked at just globally of the nations who have issued mandates. What is the gold standard as far as the unfolding of the mandate? Like, who has done this best? And I really don't have any idea on this, but yeah, but
it's got to be Israel. Israel's probably got the best rollout on that stuff. I mean, look, there's a little bit of a problem with the get a shot, take a shot like thing, and not just like promoting alcoholism or whatever. But because my issue with it is just that it encourages people that normalcy is like just right around the corner. Whereas I think what we are now understanding with this disease is that getting a vaccine is part of a savvy regimen while we still get the lid on this thing. It's not get the vaccine and then go back out to the football games. It's get the vaccine, and now you don't have to sweat when you're at the grocery store with your mask on, because between the mask and the vaccine, the odds are pretty good that even a COVID exposure is probably just going to ricochet off your chest and actually probably just give you some antibodies. You may have like an absolutely asymptomatic encounter with COVID that actually helps you out a little bit versus, if you don't have a mask on and you don't have the vaccine and exposure to COVID is possibly a trip to the hospital.
Yeah, and before I forget, I guess as the source for don't worry about the government of directly listening to AM conservative radio. It's
Someone
just
has to do it.
yes.
You keep no. You keep telling us that. I want to be clear. You didn't let me finish the sentence.
Go on.
No, that was it. That was the sentence. Someone has to do it. You keep telling us.
Okay. That was a deceptively finished sentence.
Yeah, I use clauses in a savvy way sometimes, sir.
All right. So I have heard a lot of conversation regarding how unfair it is that there is not a natural antibody test, and how this is something that speaks to how Biden and Fauci are all in step with this corporate agenda to push these very expensive vaccines.
And this is actually relevant because this is what DeSantis is also parroting. I mean, like, I'm razzing you a little bit about the AM Talk Radio thing, but it's useful because these are test labs for future Republican talking points that they're going to try to trot out there. And now,
if you follow Hannity, he is never that far away from Trump. And
no, I think Hannity's actually he's the greatest
yeah,
example, right? Because
that's why
Hannity's relationship with Trump was so tight that when Michael Cohen listed off his clients, he had exactly 3, and one of them was Sean Hannity, and the other one was Donald Trump, and I don't remember who the third guy was, but he was inconsequential. But Sean Hannity and Trump talk on a regular basis, and never has the relationship between talk radio and the actual political realm been tighter, and like this natural antibodies talking point is a great example.
Right.
And I do love DeSantis going like, oh, they're not using the science on natural antibodies. All right, Ron, like, well, if we're going to talk about using the science, can we talk about using the science then?
Yeah, and the bone to pick that I have with the Republicans, or should I go ahead and do this now, or?
Yeah, go ahead. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, go for it.
In my opinion, I looked this up. There is a medical marijuana bill in Florida, and there are people in Florida who should be quote unquote protected under the medical marijuana bill, who are being fired from their job for consuming marijuana. And so I am looking at this within the lens of they're going to take away our jobs, sort of vaccine speak. And this is something where if you really want to claim that, whenever you do pass something like medical marijuana, you don't let people get fired as they use that legislation, but you do. And that seems to be okay right now, as there are a growing number of cases of people who are getting fired for this in Florida.
The marijuana situation is one that I want to touch on in greater detail at a later point, because I think it's underappreciated, especially by people who live in blue states, how absolutely unacceptable the federal, like, well, some states have marijuana legalization, some states don't have marijuana legalization, patchwork of laws is. It would be like if gay marriage was only legal in some states but not other states. That's probably the best analogy, like that period of time where it was only legal in some states but not in other states, and so like your rights were really kind of suspect, and any number of things could happen depending on what state you're in. And like, it's not actually a good system in a country called America to have these like 50 states with all these different varying laws. Going back to the employer thing, I think this is where Republicans have really been struggling. Is it employers' rights and the right to work and the right to fire an employee whenever they want? So if they want to fire them over marijuana, that's fine because that's the employer's right to. Or or for example, a vaccine. If the employer wants you to get vaccinated and you don't want to get vaccinated, and the employee has or the employer has the right to do that. Or should maybe employees have rights? And
Yeah.
the Republicans don't really have a coherent like worldview on this, and like that's becoming kind of apparent.
You know, as far as an olive branch on both sides, in the spirit of all of uh, these conversations I've heard about how possible it is that we can all get on the same page after September 11th.
We can't.
Yeah. I think what you could have, if this really is about workers' rights, let's have a roundtable involving an equal part of Democratic and Republican talking heads, and have them have a philosophical discussion on two numbers: the 100 number on the why is 100 the magic number for employers who don't have to follow this, and the 32 number, which is the number of hours someone has to work before this applies to them as far as healthcare is concerned. If you want to really have an actual conversation out loud where you can show people that you're taking this conversation seriously from a real philosophical standpoint, argue that where the outcome is not legislation here or there. You're just showing people that you're serious about the subject, because those two numbers mean a lot to this conversation.
Yeah, they're relevant. We'll get to the employer requirement for 100 plus employees in just a moment. Real quickly, this is less of a requirement and more of a I wish you would. Calling on large entertainment venues to require proof of vaccination or testing for entry. That to me seems pretty toothless because, you know, they're not doing anything with it. But then we get to the kind of granddaddy of them all, requiring all employers with 100 plus employees to ensure their workers are vaccinated or tested weekly. This is the one that is potentially the sticky wicket. I mean, it's in a way the one I was most excited about because I think it'll pay the most dividends. It's also the one that's going to pick the fight with the big corporations. It will. I mean, you're already starting to see pushback from certain groups, as we'll get to in just a moment. And I think in terms of debate, where the Republicans would have the best argument or the best engagement point would be why 100, why not 50?
Right.
And then there's another question that many of these employers are bringing up that's a valid one of, when you say 100 employees, are you talking about for the total organization or are you talking at a specific site? And if it's at a specific site, in my opinion, that's stupid. The number should be way lower. If it's at a specific site, it should probably start at around 15, maybe at 10. I mean, really. So it's got to be 100 employees grand total. But then, like, a different way of thinking about this is, why does it really matter how many employees at all? Doesn't it really matter how many people at a given site?
Right.
So, like, if you were really going to try to come up with this regulation, in my opinion, the way to do this regulation is any employment site that has more than 10 people is now requiring vaccination or daily testing. And so, like, let's say you're an employer and you don't want to do that for philosophical reasons or whatever. One option is figure out a way to do your office remotely, or do your office with staggered days where people are in on staggered days. There are different ways to get COVID compliant that don't necessarily need to be requiring vaccinations. And
So
I
imagine
am in
someone,
favor of
yeah,
giving more people ways to be COVID safe or COVID cool, as I like to say, just because, the consonants or whatever. Like, you can be more COVID cool without, like, necessarily requiring everyone's vaccinated. Although, again, stated preferences, everyone would be. I just, dude, look, at the end of the day, we just got to get a lid on it one way or another, and not everyone's going to be persuaded by these arguments.
yeah. So if this is about density at a site, and I guess that's what this is, or this is about so many people under
That to
one
me is the
roof,
real point of question. I just don't see how Republicans turn the conversation to no, Joe Biden, this is wrong. It should be about density.
right,
That is the right response. If I was
right,
if yeah, no, that is how I would respond to
right.
it. But then the policy prescription is more progressive and more, do more
It's
essentially.
not, it's not as,
It's not Republican-y.
it's not Republican. But there's no counter to it. There's absolutely, like, what do you say against that once you reframe this as a density issue?
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. If there's a bakery that has a chain of them, let's say, I was like up in Massachusetts over the weekend, so I'll just like, thinking of this one bakery. Let's say La Florentina opens up, they have 7 people per shop, and they open up 15 shops across the state. Yeah, now they have 100 employees. Does La Florentina really need to be testing every one of these bakeries and requiring vaccinations at every one of these bakeries? When in theory you can essentially achieve herd immunity in any one of these bakeries with 6 people out of the 7 being vaccinated. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It starts getting weird because, like, you don't actually need to require everyone. I think you actually get away by the math of like 5 out of 7 being back. It doesn't need to be that way. I don't think, in order to get to where we're trying to get to. And I just, you want to leave as many options as possible and show that you're trying to come in with a light touch. I mean, I'm dealing with this in my own sort of experiences with my own business of, like, you don't want to tell customers, hey, no, we now all have to wear masks or anything at the same time, but you also can't tell people nobody has to do anything. It doesn't matter if the Delta variant's happening. You got to find some place in between. To your point, though, in terms of headwinds, Politico reporting today in their inimitable political way that Biden's workplace vaccine mandate is facing headwinds. President Joe Biden's surprise order for the Labor Department to issue mandatory vaccine rules for large companies, leaning, is already facing headwinds from businesses, conservative governors, and even his union allies. Management side attorneys, or they could say corporate attorneys, but they don't, say that they are fielding frenzied calls from companies with questions over what the rules requiring them to verify that their workers are vaccinated or at least tested weekly for COVID-19 will actually entail, and whether businesses and or unvaccinated employees will have to pay for the testing. So essentially, like, who's going to have to pick up the bill on this testing? Well, I mean, if you want to put it on the unvaccinated employee, I sort of, like, don't give a shit at this point. Like, sucks to be you. You could get the paid time off. That's 6 and carrots. If it's gonna make if it's gonna make the medicine go down more for the employer, this is like the only time I'll ever say this. I say, don't make the employer pay for this. This is totally the employee's fault. They need to go and pay for the testing if they have to get tested every week. Unions, they've been treading a fine line over the new policy and arguing that workers and laborers should have a say in the mandate policy, and also strongly urging their members to get the shot. So, like, it's kind of like, I get where unions are caught between a rock and a hard place. I actually have to say, for their part, unions have been playing this about as well as you can. They know the right answer here. They also know the right answer probably internally inside the union and what the majority opinion is. At the same time, being union strong does mean having to encompass a wide range of opinions among employees, and lots of unions have Republican voting members in the union. It's weird. It happens. I swear to God, they're real people. I've heard tell of them. I've met them. So you actually need them in your union, and so you need a union that's sort of, permissive of this, because oftentimes those guys are reliable votes in your union. So that is a challenge for Biden. Let me see. The new emergency rules were announced Thursday as part of a new six-part effort from Biden to increase the vaccination rate in the U.S. as he seeks to tamp down criticism over the administration's handling of a surge in coronavirus cases related to the Delta variant. Only about 53% of the population is currently fully vaccinated. This is the real problem, right? Like, Biden was shooting for 73 or 70% vaccination rate by July 4th. He fell way short of that, and they had to massage up the numbers. The problem with massaging up the numbers is that is fine if there's not actually another surge and the story is over at this point. The story is not over at this point, and there is another surge. So it is a real problem. So you have people like Ian Schaefer, a chairman or a chair of the Loeb's Employment and Labor Practice in New York. It's millions of dollars a year to any size company. I've seen companies do it, talking about the rapid testing program imagined under Biden's thing. Because they'd have to buy it, they'd have to train how to do the testing. They'd have, it makes sense. It does. It sounds like it wouldn't be that expensive, but it probably would end up costing about $1 million all told, with all the training and implementation stuff. And there are real concerns that it wouldn't actually guarantee the health and safety in a way that mandating vaccines would. So in this case, the attorney is basically saying, it's nice that you're offering the testing alternative, except that it's going to require employers a lot of money to implement the testing thing, which is, again, basically an indulgence for these employees who don't want to get vaccinated, which, again, makes it all the more like, for all the rest of us employees, like, wow, that's millions of dollars that could be going to our annual raises. And instead, they're not going to our annual raises. I mean, not that they necessarily would. I get that, guys. I'm not that stupid. I've been around the block here. But instead of them going anywhere else, they're going into a money pit for the jerk who refuses to wear a mask while working with all y'all. Like,
yeah, I'd rather the money go somewhere else.
Anywhere else. I mean, I'll be honest, and it takes a lot for me to say this. I'd rather go to CEO like bonuses at the end of the year than the jerk who. I mean, I'm serious. And like that, it takes a lot to get me to side with CEO bonuses of all things. Like, but seriously, why do I want this indulgence for this other employee? I mean, even in terms of my union, if they leave the company and they're out of the union's still fine. You know, like the union's just probably actually more ideologically homogenous at this point. It's probably not hurting anything.
At some point, do you consider this mandate to be an issue that is going to be a sticking issue as far as in a particular swing state or in a particular congressional race? Is this a breaking point for it? Like, because I feel like that's the underlying fear that people have about this, because this has an undetermined outcome. Like, it has begun.
I'll give you one. I'll give you one where Democrats might want to be wary about. Georgia.
Yeah.
You got the Republican governor there. You've got a strong Republican electorate there. This was a red state for a long while. What turned it blue is the African-American electorate out there in Georgia, and saying this with some degree of delicateness here. One point of weakness in the vaccination campaign has been among many in the African-American community. There has been some reticence to get the vaccine for various reasons, some historically driven, others more analogous in many ways to what we see on the right of center when it comes to not getting the vaccine. And I could see potentially a scenario wherein Joe Biden's vaccine mandate creates some issues in Georgia. I'm not coming up with any other battleground states off the top of my head where it poses any immediate challenge, but Georgia does stick out. Maybe you know
I
what?
was gonna say
You know what?
Arizona.
I actually think no, because I think a lot of the Arizona transplants are from California, and even the red voters in Arizona, they are like California Republicans, so they're like cool with vaccines and just want their taxes low. So like this might where what you might actually see in other states that's like a little more subtle is actual subtle support for this. I mean, I even see among members of my own Republican family, like they don't like Joe Biden all of a sudden, but they don't hate this. They like this.
Yeah.
One problem though to this plan, we were talking about the rapid testing. The big issue here is that there's just not a lot of rapid testing supplies, period. So it's not just the implementation costs. In response to this new plan, Virginia businesses and health departments are searching for rapid tests to no avail due to a shortage. Health officials are hoping that Biden's going to invoke the Defense Production Act to ramp up the production of the rapid tests because of their scarcity. The doctor, Noel Bissell of the New River Health District, says that the shortage is a big problem. Another problem is that businesses aren't sure how to organize testing for employees, and the health department can't help. We don't have the capacity to arrange to be the testing source for every business or agency for their unvaccinated folks. That's again Noel Bissell of the New River Health District. So essentially, businesses are going to have to organize it because the health departments are not ready to step in all of a sudden be like the administrative hub for every business in the district. Makes sense. How do you just scale that up all of a sudden? So now it's got to go back to the businesses who are going to need to hire somebody new to do that. That person who is new is going to need to be trained. Like, this is not easy. And what is much easier is for people to just go and get the shot. I mean, and if you are pro-business, if you are someone who is pro-business and you really think about this, another way of thinking about this is imagine if one of your employees was going to force upon you onerous costs of upwards of $1 million and you didn't have the right to even fire them. You're a small business owner. Wouldn't you want that, right? Like, as someone who is sort of in this realm. Yeah, duh. So this is like a no-brainer for me. And if you were not someone who fetishized small business owners, but instead actually was a small business owner, or was someone who like actually like knew what small business owners were going through, you'd realize that like the cost of implementation on this would be crushing. So you go, okay, well, Joe Biden's only requiring it on employers with 100 employees. For now, that might change. As we just said, there's a cogent argument why it very well might change to a site-based requirement, and maybe ought to. And if you're a small business owner who has a site with 10 employees, which we said was a completely plausible number, $1 million compliance program is insane overhead to suddenly incur. So wouldn't it be easier, and shouldn't it be the way for that small business owner to preserve their business, to be able to fire the employee who refuses to get vaccinated and hire someone else from the market who will come in vaccinated and do the work? Why shouldn't the employer have that right? Like, there isn't actually a cogent libertarian argument for this. There isn't really a cogent conservative argument for this. If you believe in sort of this expansive view of the employer's rights, what the Biden administration arguing here is very straight ahead. And I think based around this too, they're about to go up to the Supreme Court and like get a huge win, like a 6-3 win. If and when someone tries to challenge this, because Neil Gorsuch is a guy who says that if your employer says to stay in a truck and die on an icy road, you should. Like, why wouldn't Neil Gorsuch say, if your employer says get the vaccine or lose your job, then bye bye, see you bye. You don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, that ends up for me, and I think that's where the mind of the media on the right and where the mind of the judiciary on the right are two very different places. And there's not
They
really
just never think about any of this stuff coming back to haunt them. Like they're just like, yeah, businesses crush those workers, those stupid unions, those liberals. They love the unions. They never really think, like when Neil Gorsuch during his confirmation hearing is getting asked by Al Franken about this case with the trucker on the icy road in South Dakota. I hear this story and I go, oh my God, this is abysmal. This is abhorrent. How can anybody who's ever been an employee anywhere or like ever worked for anyone else possibly think it is right to stay on your job even if it means it will kill you, and that the employer is right to ask you to do so? Neil Gorsuch is like, yeah. Federal Society's like, yeah, that's our guy. Yeah. And Republicans, and by Republicans I mean Republican voters, not congressional Republicans. I mean like the
right.
guys who you work with who are Republican inexplicably. They never stop to question, what would that mean for me? Would that mean that like maybe my boss would leave me to die in my truck? And they could, like and the tragic answer is yeah, dude, yeah. Like, don't you get it? And they didn't. Now, only now are they starting to realize that, like, oh, this is bad. I mean, it's the same thing with, like, a lot of these big tech issues. They just didn't really care when people like us were sounding the alarm, 7, 8, 9 years ago about Facebook and about Apple and Google and all these companies amassing this data, these NSA data centers and all that sort of thing. It's unfortunate. Last thing I want to talk about, though, before we end this daily dispatch episode, don't worry about the government, which got a little bit of run on itself, didn't it? I want to talk about this story. It wouldn't be a show if we didn't get into a little Republican hypocrisy. New York State Hospital will stop delivering babies as workers quit over a vaccine mandate. If a conflict at one New York hospital over vaccine mandates for healthcare workers is any indication, the Biden administration's new effort to mandate vaccines for millions of workers could be in for an uphill battle. So we talked about employers, but we also talked about contractors and certain health workers. The plan requires workers who are employed at hospitals, home health agencies, and other types of medical facilities that participate in Medicare and Medicaid to get a COVID-19 vaccine. In New York, where Andrew Cuomo, once fantastic governor, mandated that all healthcare workers in the state get a vaccine, employees at hospitals and long-term care facilities need to get their first dose done by the 27th. That's coming up in a couple of weeks here. At one local hospital in upstate New York, dozens of staff members walked away from their jobs after refusing to get vaccinated. The move has seriously disrupted care in the process. Lewis County General Hospital in Lowville, New York, announced Friday that it is pausing maternity services later this month because dozens of staff members quit rather than get COVID-19 vaccines. It's certainly their option to do so. Their hospital will be unable to safely staff the maternity departments and newborn nursery as of the 25th, according to Lewis County Health System CEO Gerald Kayer. He added that other departments in the hospital are also at risk if workers don't get vaccinated. As of Friday, 30 employees had resigned from Lewis County General Hospital. At least 464 people in the Lewis County healthcare system have been vaccinated, a 73% immunization rate among employees. Separately, there are 165 workers who have not been vaccinated and have not shared what their plans are as the deadline for a first shot approaches. So, this is an absolute mess. Just one last figure here. Only about 46% of the county is fully vaccinated in that particular county in Lowville, New York. So that's actually fairly low. That's like closer to Texas than it is to the East Coast. It's a fairly conservative county. Not the irony is not lost on me that these people who are resigning, presumably because they are very religious and thusly very pro-life, are leaving the maternity ward where babies are being delivered, the essential babies that gestation should be legally mandated to be had. These people are derelicting their duty, their sacred duty to do this, to help deliver these babies. So they're so pro-life, except when it comes to the vaccine. So it's like, oh, I could get the vaccine and potentially help save a baby who otherwise might not have been carried into this world safely. Or I could protect my liberty and, my body, my choice, and I'm going to quit my job and I'm not going to, have any responsibility for this life that I have defined. Yeah, I'm going to beat up on this, not just because the fact that abortion and the fact that it will very soon be nearly impossible to get an abortion due to this very group of people's multi-decade crusade. Yeah, I'm going to beat up on them. Those people are fascists in a very subtle way. But also they're hypocrites. They're like disgusting hypocrites, because if they really walked their walk, if this pro-life community during the COVID-19 crisis had taken it upon themselves to be some of the most aggressive COVID-19 hawks, to the point where you and I were getting on this show and going, geez Louise, these pro-lifers are going too far with this COVID-19 stuff. They're like, everyone's got to be, like, if we the libs were getting exhausted by how far the the pro-life community was taking COVID-19, it'd be one thing. If they were really walking their walk on this, but they don't. And this story, as much as any others, actually more than any other story that I can think of during this pandemic, really hits that home. You have people who are quitting because of religious objections that almost by the numbers necessarily have to be based around the Abrahamic faith. That is Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. Very likely Christianity or Catholicism or some derivative of that, because we're usually talking about Catholic hospitals or Methodist hospitals or Presbyterian hospitals. These are Abrahamic faiths that talk about a right to life, and these people are walking off of their job at a maternity ward. Nothing speaks more to the ideological bankruptcy of the pro-life movement than the idea that people with religious objections, because of their strong belief in religion, can find a way to rationalize walking off of delivering babies that they believe to be alive, into this world so that they can achieve whatever they believe their metaphysical destiny is.
I've got to imagine they've heard some sort of pushback, just even though the the vaccination rate in that area of New York is low. You still have to encounter some sort of I wonder what they've heard and how they push back from it. But this is it's just glaring how
Oh, meanwhile, you're also going to leave other people to die in other wards. I mean, talking about the second order and third order effects in these hospitals, which is people not getting procedures that they need to get, people who are in intensive care and critical care units not getting the best care. You're talking about experienced people walking off, taking their ball and going home. I mean, in Houston, they had a mass resignation event, which was like 150 people. And this is at a time where there is really a nurse staffing shortage, where because of that shortage, you are seeing rates for nurses just go through the roof. I guess the other thing I would say to these people is, if you're doing this, you're being tremendously short-sighted. You got your morals, but you might be leaving some serious bread on the table. And, I mean, beyond that, when I see rates as high as they are these days at my other job, it does make me think that there's just a broad speaking shortage. So these people are really leaving the country and the hospital systems out to dry at a time where they're really needed the most. Do you have any final thoughts on this topic here?
I think what this also is, if nursing was not in such a shortage and these people could not find a position in many different directions. I believe many of these people would not have made this claim or would not have made this move in the name of morality if they were in a different position to where they couldn't find another nursing job so easily. Maybe they don't find the moral gumption to walk off this job and find one right around the corner the next week.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a thing with nursing. Is I mean, here's the other thing: where are these people going to go to get more work? I think that's going to be the real interesting thing.
Yeah,
And if you're a patient, would you really want to go to a hospital where no one's required to be vaccinated?
yeah.
I mean, and would you really want to be the hospital that has the reputation of no one here is required to be vaccinated? I mean, it's essentially making a second class hospital for the unvaccinated.
Well, there are ways of making what used to be a federal job into a private job. The prison system's full of that. I mean, as far as
yeah, no, I basically think that's how it's going to go. You're going to see more of these private hospitals.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it off here on this daily dispatch. It was meant to be a little faster, but I guess maybe the rule is more like it's just going to be on one topic, and then we'll see where we're at the end of the week. If we need to do a week in review show or what needs to happen, maybe I do a summary podcast. Maybe I do an edit of all of it together. We'll find out together. Trying new things. Needed to shake it up. We're shaking it up. So if you like this show and you want to support the show, $1 a show is all we ask. And that's like $1 per actual Don't Worry episode. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify to hear an actual full version of the show. But if you go to patreon.com/DWATG, you will get all of the video versions of the show, which are available to Patreon subscribers. And you'll get all of these on the Patreon feed. Any extra things that I put up, those will also be up on the Patreon feed. I am always trying to do more and extra things on there and try to make sure that I'm engaged. And the Patreon feed is the easiest and best way to get everything over at patreon.com/DWATG. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at DWATG. Brian, where are you on Twitter?
At Postman Retweets, at Postman RTs.
Excellent. So, I want to thank you guys all so much for listening. Don't click the link below because I'm not post-producing this show like that. Bye.